everybody, Scotty Milas, All Things Considered Franchising, powered by Scott Milas, franchise coach. All Things Considered Franchising podcast focuses on the franchising industry. No scripted questions, just open conversations with guests regarding the industry, specific brands, the trends. Scott Milas Franchise Coach is a organization that helps people research and explore opportunities in business ownership, preferably franchising, matching up skill sets, financial requirements, investment levels to a business model that is formulated that we put together. So today's guest is someone that I have gotten to know over probably the last 18 months, I would say. You may have already watched or heard the podcast with Jason Olson, who is the founder of Image Studios. And Brandon is Director, VP of Franchise Development for Image Studios. I've had the opportunity over the last, like I said, 18 months working with Jason, putting a couple of deals together, nice deals, and working on a couple of others right now. So, Brandon, welcome to All Things Considered Franchising.
Hey, Scotty, thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for adding me to your podcast list here.
Yeah, awesome. It's awesome. And just want to start out, Brendan, you have obviously a tenured experience in the franchising industry, and it's been focused on the health and beauty industry. I'm not going to go into the resumes and name all the companies you've been with, but it's a tenured experience. You've been with some reputable companies. And, several years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, you jumped on board with Jason and with Image Studios. And just tell us a little about your journey franchising, your thoughts about the industry, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. No, happy to share that. It's probably an unorthodox approach to getting into a career in franchise development, but I was actually looking for a franchise myself. This was over 20 years ago, and I was just blown away at what I saw and the options that were out there. Probably like most people, they think of food first. You probably get that a lot as well. And I didn't realize what was out there, but I was exploring that. I was doing some research, and I found this concept that I loved. It was a beauty industry concept, and it was out of my range financially at that time. And so I couldn't do it. So I ended up with a relationship with these folks, and they ended up hiring me. They said, look, if you can't open it, you've got the passion to help other people open it. And that's how I started my career in franchising. And it wasn't by a plan, of course, to get into the beauty industry. That was probably the last thing that I was thinking about at the time. But it was so rewarding to be a part of that and to really get to know beauty professionals. And I just parlayed that. The majority of my industry or my experience in the industry has been on the beauty side of things. So it's been pretty fun. It's been rewarding.
Now, a lot has happened probably in 20 years in regards to the industry, the beauty industry. What can you share with our audience, significant changes, for the better that have taken place over the last 20 years in the health and beauty category?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, franchising in general has changed, right? Just the
absolutely.
Sheer number of concepts, technology-based and efficiencies. There's been so many of those things that have happened. And when you look at the beauty industry, the things that have really changed in my mind over the last 20 years is really that the path to what a creative person like a beauty pro can actually do. They used to kind of have this old school way, right? You got out of beauty school, you get a job, right? Or you rent a chair and you're in a traditional environment. And those things seem to be going away, or at least they spend less time in those avenues because their end result is to be their own business owner, to be in a position to be creative, to be in a nice space, to be in a private space. So that's where Salon Suite was actually born. So you see this full circle thing in the beauty industry now. And it's taken a few years because there's a lot of beauty talent out there. There's a lot of beauty businesses out there. But a good franchise that can not only innovate, but kind of shore up that fragmentation of the old school stuff, that's what I'm seeing here in the beauty industry over the last 20 years. So it's a full circle thing, and it's an innovation thing.
Now, the beauty industry, especially in the salon segment, when you talk about salons, I'm talking about not the suites, but, the actual studios, the Great Clips, the Regis, their brands. that tends to be a stereotype type of business. I mean, when people inquire or you present options or talk about, getting into the health, the hair and beauty space, people kind of take a step back and go, well, wait a minute, I don't cut hair, but I think it's safe to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, a larger percentage of the people outside of the independent studio owner, but the person who is involved on the franchising side, the Regises, the Great Clips, the Cost Cutters. I mean, you can go down the list, the Fantastic Sams. Those people who own the franchises are really true entrepreneurs. They're not cutting the hair. They're running a business, oversight, making sure that their managers are running the locations for them. Am I correct? I mean, is there a kind of that stereotype when somebody says, hey, you interested in a hair salon or a studio, cosmetology industry?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That stereotype was around 20 years ago. It's still around today, right? Unfortunately, because people see that and it's usually so far away from who they are or where they are in life, right? Because most people aren't going to be creative people who are going to get into a business. They don't really match those things together, right? But the truth is you don't need to know anything about that, right? If you do, it can serve you well from the point of terminology or being able to speak the same language from the start. But you certainly don't have to do that. Whether it's some of those brands that you mentioned or really any beauty brand, you don't really need that type of industry experience. And in salon suites, you really don't need it at all. We've got a few owners that have that, and that's great. But that's the rarity side of things. That's not the norm. So people focus on the business side and then recognize that you're not there to talk to them about haircuts and shampoo, right? They don't need you for that. You're their advocate, the mentor side of these things and the business side of these things. That's where we're going with that. So they're pretty good on their own, right? The beauty pros, they get their license. They've got a skill set. They're creative people. They don't need somebody coming in there to tell them that. So you're exactly right. That stereotype is still around, but
I like to share a story, which is a great lead into Image Studios. I have a gentleman and his wife that I met out in Arizona a number of years ago, and he owns 85 Great Clip salons and owned a couple of Harley Davidson dealerships and Napa store. And he's kind of that one of those groovy type guys, probably grew up in the 60s. And, and you look at him and you say haircuts, Great Clips. But, he said to me, to your point, he says, I'm not in the hair business. I don't cut hair. I run a business that does hair. And, I have managers, district managers, and, he's a multi franchise owner. I got him into a couple of other things. So, which is a tie into Image Studios, because when you look at a person like that who has 85 of something, there's a lot of moving parts, locations, real estate, whether you own the real estate, whether you're leasing, the number of employees, the number of managers. When you look at the salon suite industry, Image Studios, you're taking that business and really putting it into one, taking 4,000 or 5,000 square feet and leasing it out to cosmetologists and really kind of building the business that way than having, you don't manage the 40 or 35 cosmetologists. You help them with their business, but you're not managing them. You're not paying them. They're actually paying you a rent to rent out the studio. So tell us a little bit more about Image and the advantages to a business like Image versus owning, 50 cost cutters and there's nothing wrong with that. It all depends on what you want to do, but where are the advantages to being with an Image versus multiple locations with another concept that does hair?
Yeah, sure. And your groovy guy that you mentioned, 85 locations. If you have 85 of anything, Scotty, any franchise, you've got your own little empire.
Yeah, you're groovy. Right? You're groovy regardless.
Yeah, that's why you know him. You're a groovy guy too. So
well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Having those conversations. No, but you're exactly right. Like there's going to be different things. There's a different type of a business model here. And as you were talking, the thing that I kept thinking of was, what is your return on time when you run a business like this, right? Like with ours, it's as you described, it's a pretty clean cut real estate play at the end of the day, which we think, of course, is advantageous. But when you rent the suites to established beauty professionals, you're right. Again, they don't need a lot of oversight. They're not employees. They don't need that micromanagement. They're doing their thing and they have a full book of clientele and they're off and running. So from a franchise ownership perspective, again, you don't need to go in there and talk to them about beauty industry things, right? It's a real estate play and it is a business owner to business owner relationship. That's what our franchise owners do, and they do it on a very semi-absentee basis. So the advantages are the time, for sure. You're in a rewarding position to be helping other business owners, and you're in a really strong real estate play at the same time. It covers a lot of ground.
Now, touching on the labor part of it, as what, you mentioned that you're not managing or paying or, the cosmetologists, the stylists that are renting space from you. But one of the unique things about Image Studios is that you have an operational side to your business model that helps cosmetologists, hairstylists be successful running their studios. I mean, obviously, there's a play here for your franchisees that if they're successful, they're going to stay. If they're not successful, then you got an open space and you got to go find somebody else. So tie the training in and, on the franchisee side, helping the cosmetologists be successful business owners in their studios.
Yeah, for sure. I would tie that all the way back to what do they not get in cosmetology school? The business side of things, that is a skill set school. It is a license from the state. So they're not always getting that type of business environment, yet they are going out there to start their own business and work in that direction because that's what they've chosen to do. So when they come to you, they're going to have the very pretty suite, the privacy of that, the status of that almost. Our places are absolutely gorgeous. Creative people love to be in that type of creative vibe, if you will, creative environment. So they've got all of those things, but when you can help them on the business side, that's really what makes them complete, and it makes our model a complete picture, right? Otherwise, you're just taking a piece of real estate, you can put up some walls and you can put some people in the suites, right?
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But you're trying to take that next step to really empower them to be who they are and help them be business owners where they didn't get that training elsewhere. So you've got a franchise like Image Studios, you're selecting the right kind of franchise owners. So they know that this is a real estate play and it's balanced with the relationships they're going to have with those pros. And they know they're going to have the best design and support and all those types of things. But that business side, that to me is what makes it a real complete product in the eyes of a beauty pro, and also the stickiest product when you get out there, because they have the mobile app. Yeah, and all those things, the technology part, the mobile app, the courses that we teach them, it just makes them better business owners.
The profile of your franchisees, and again, I talked to a number of people about the brand, present the brand, but the fact of the matter is that this is a far stretch from the $5 footlong or even a McDonald's. I mean, it's probably in that McDonald's investment level, a little bit less. So I call it a big boy, big girl investment level, but the validation, supported by the item 19 really is strong. But let's talk about the profile of the person that really fits in well as a potential franchisee or a franchisee with Image. I mean, because I'm sure there's a lot of misunderstanding sometimes that you're getting calls and I get calls, that, it's a hairstylist that just wants a studio and thinking that they're buying a studio, and that it's not. It's right. It's a complete, A to Z business model. So what are we looking for? The people that are listening to our conversation, what person is being attracted to Image as an investment?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's such a great question, because you're right about the business model. I call it a non-traditional business model, right? When you don't have employees and you don't have really inventory, those things just don't exist in this world. You're not even selling a product, right? You're recruiting to find those established pros. That is a non-traditional business model. So the thing that I look for first and foremost is for people, if your instinct is hitting you and this is a curious thing to you, you really need to see this through, right? Show the ability to follow a process. I think that's generic to franchising anyway.
Yep.
But when you have yeah, so if you've got a non-traditional model, though, you really got to break it down and build it back up again. And the only way you're going to do that is to take the steps in the process. So the people that are curious enough to do that, those are the ones that are going through, right? These are the ones that are finding what they need and seeing this modern concept for what it is, or this non-traditional concept for what it is. So I would start there. But I would also say on the other side, the real estate play is actually very straightforward. So they either know a little bit about that or they're interested in that. That's not the difficult part to me. It's if you can't look at this and say, I'm on this mission, I'm on this values and culture with you, I want to help these other individual business owners. If you're not in that direction, it won't be fun for you, and this should be fun. And if you think it's just going to be something you start, and walk away from and not have relationships with those folks, don't do it. That doesn't work. So that balance has to be there. Otherwise, spouse teams are fantastic. People that can look at this for what it is, a balance between real estate and relationships, and get into that process and be passionate about it and like the fact that you're probably going to end up being some sort of mentor relationship with these other business owners. And that should be a fun and rewarding thing overall.
Sometimes on the real estate play, I get questions about businesses that will allow the individual to obviously own the business and own the real estate, but maybe at a later date, sell the business, but own the real estate. Does that come into play with Image? I mean, is that because that obviously if you can own the real estate, I mean, I'm a believer. If you can own the real estate, man, you're just way ahead of the game because you're just paying yourself rent. I mean, it's you're building equity that way. So does that come into play with Image?
So it hasn't yet, and we'd probably have to talk to Jason about that, how he sees maybe the vision in the future of it going in that direction. I certainly think it's possible. I certainly think that it's a strategy that people can get into when they join something like Image Studios. But right now, what we've seen is the ability to get the right kind of site and the ability to get the right kind of deal on that site for our franchise owners. Then leasing has been the way to go. So our entire network is probably 98%.
Yeah, I wouldn't encourage anybody.
Sense.
Yeah, I would encourage anybody to go out and buy invest in any type of franchise and buy the real estate. Your first, second, third location, maybe you're leasing, get to know the business, make sure you're comfortable with it because, it's owning the real estate's great, but it's also another investment that if the business doesn't take off as well as you think it will initially, then, you're kind of, backing yourself up. One of the interesting things about Image, because I get a lot of people that call me up and say, hey, I'm really looking for a business that doesn't have any employees and I don't have to work a lot and it's Monday through Friday. And, or I want a semi-absentee business. And I've always said there's no such thing as a completely passive absentee ownership business, because if you're going to invest any money in a business, you want to be involved in the business at some point. But Image is unique in the sense that there are two choices on the employee side, really. It's either owner operator, that maybe 10 to 15 hours a week. I think you and I have had that conversation. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. Or you hire somebody else to do the Monday through Friday workload. Walk us through that, because it's an interesting model with not a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, not a lot of moving parts. There's certainly activity, right?
Yes.
But it's not anything that's complicated, right? So when it comes to the time frame, the first thing that I always look at is there's obviously going to be different people who look at it different ways. There's going to be different personalities. Some people just want to stop by there every day, right? And you can certainly do that. But I think once you're occupied, that's not really a requirement to do. I would say most of our owners would tell you that. So it really just depends on how you see it. But we certainly have had people who have kept doing what they're doing. And sometimes that's business ownership elsewhere, or they have a corporate career. You can certainly lean into our support and the efficiencies and the resources and the training and the technology you can do those things. And we've certainly had people on the other side who said, look, I'm going to leave this position and I'm going to tackle this more full time or open more locations. And you could certainly do that as well. What you mentioned as far as having an employee, we've had a few folks do that. Some people have jumped into a bigger development deal and
Right.
they needed one employee from the beginning. And that makes sense, as well in that kind of scenario. So there's a few scenarios, but it really is meant to be a true semi-absentee ownership. And the only marker I would put on that, Scotty, is I'm talking about once you're occupied.
Right. Yeah.
There's certainly work to be done, and you got to get there, you got to follow along. But once you're occupied, this should be a true semi-absentee business. And my opinion is probably, depending on the personality, I mean, you should be less than 10 hours. You really should. But it just depends on how well you follow the system as well.
Right. And the other aspect of this is, as we discussed on the real estate side, you're really focusing on renting the studios to a specific industry. I mean, not all of the segments within cosmetology fit into the suite, but you're really focused on the cosmetology industry in general. It's not like you're networking with the general public or the general B2B crowd in your area, your territory. It's the cosmetology industry, correct?
You want to focus on the established beauty and wellness professionals. That's where we're going with all of that. And the beauty industry, the traditional beauty service providers, right? The hairstylists, the estheticians, massage therapists, and barbers, those are all typical candidates. But we have other wellness professionals and even artistic professionals that would fit that entire vibe that can rent a suite in all locations. So it's the quality of the person, as long as they're in the beauty and wellness industry. And as long as there's nothing strange, liability, surgical, chemical wise, right? You don't want to get into that. You don't need it anyway. There's a lot of traditional beauty and wellness folks out there.
Right. What else can you share about image? Anything else you want to bring up, touch on? It's a remarkable, I think, a remarkable space to be in business wise. But like we said, we discussed that it's a big boy, big girl investment. The item 7. I mean, if you want to walk us through the item 7 specifics, you can. I mean, but in general, I think you're talking about, if not $1 million, a little over $1 million, depending on the size of the building, number of studios. Net worth, I think you're looking for somewhere around 750,000. Liquidity, $500,000 doesn't mean you're going to use it. And then, of course, you have some relationships that you've developed over the years as you built the brand for financing, for people that are interested in financing. Have I missed anything, left anything out on that?
No, you did pretty good. You can take my calls tomorrow with my candidates. I'm going to take the day off. No, you're pretty close. We look at about 750 liquidity, and we look at about 1.5 million net worth. So you were close. We do have funding relationships for sure. We would want to get that candidate speaking to them, pretty early on. But that seems to be a very good source for us as well. And as we grow, of course, those things will change and get better.
Right.
We're actually at 208 locations now, Scotty, as of yesterday, I think.
Wow.
Just as an update for you as well, right? That's either open or in some phase of development, so we're moving right along. But that's the person we're looking for as far as from a financial standpoint.
Partnerships. I mean, if somebody said, "Hey, I'm not quite there, but maybe I'll grab my brother-in-law, sister-in-law, my best friend," or partnerships. Would you consider partnerships?
At this investment level, absolutely. And we've got a few of those, right?
Okay.
And I think the only thing you know this too, I think we've even talked about this, when you put two people together, you really need to make sure that they're going to be on the same page, right? And I've certainly had candidates who've had partnerships where they could not get on the same page. And we have image owners right now who absolutely have partnerships that are on the same page. So you've got to feel that out in the process. But at this investment level, I think it makes sense sometimes.
Yeah, it's
and we would bet that as much as the candidate.
Yeah, I always go through the partnerships and, spouses, couples that are looking to get into business together. I always try to give them that, what I call the legal pad, the yellow legal pad exercise. Each of them sit at the end of the table with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and write down what you think the other person's responsibilities are in the business. And I said, if you can agree on that, at least that way you're 90% there. I said, because if
I like that.
if Mrs. wants to go out with the girlfriends shopping and it's her day to work, and the husband wants to go play golf, well, so if you get through that exercise you're doing. Brandon, the franchise industry we touched on at the beginning has gone through a lot in 20 years. The 20 years that you've been in it is, the lifetime that I've been in it. It remains strong. It's had some hurdles. In your view, are you still a believer that franchising is a great option for entrepreneurs to get into business?
I absolutely do. That's such a great question, because from the very, very beginning of learning about the franchise industry for the last 20 years, I always heard that, right? Entrepreneurs are good for this, but you have to have an entrepreneur spirit at the very least, right? A pure entrepreneur for me is going to develop something from the ground up, tweak it and sell it. That's a pure
that visual entrepreneur. Yep, absolutely. That visual entrepreneur.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, for sure. And to me, I think it's more of like maybe a half step down. It's more of the entrepreneurial spirit to get into a franchise and use that framework, because you're still going to be following the system that somebody else built, right? So if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, that's what if it's a good match for you, that's what a good franchise should match up with folks like that. So you and I both seen that for many, many years.
That's great. Anything else you want to add about Image? Anything else you want to, kind of toss into the ring at this point? Getting ready to wrap up here, but, just wanted to see if there's anything last minute you want our audience to know about Image. And of course, how do people get in touch with you to learn more?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I am everywhere. They certainly could, if they're interested in the franchise, they should be going through you and getting some expertise. That's for sure. There's 4,000 concepts out there now. Nobody's going to do that on their own.
Right,
so
right.
They need an expert for sure. No, the only thing I would say is, now that I've reached this point and you see what this model can do and what it can do for the beauty pros, it truly is a full circle solution for so many of those beauty pros when you're doing it right. And doing it right is growing properly. It's having a foundation of values and culture. And those are the reasons that I'm here. It's the reason why I can talk to candidates and just have genuine conversations with them and figure out if this is the right fit for them or not. Because it's a non-traditional business. To your point, it's a much higher investment. It still makes sense, but you got to find the right fit. And that's what we're doing. So again, the update on 208 locations open or in development, just in the last 4 years or so is fun. That's responsible growth too. And I like that about a franchise. Great.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting brand. And I know the clients that have worked with you and made the investment are very excited about it. And I know their vision is kind of big, so it's kind of exciting. So we have been talking to Brandon Campbell, Director of Franchise Development for Image Studios, kind of a legend in the industry, been around the block or two. Very knowledgeable, and I'm sure if you just have any general questions about franchising, reach out to me, and we can kind of get you connected with Brandon. If you have an interest in learning more about Image Studios, reach out to me, and I'll be glad to make the connection for you on your behalf, and we'll kind of go from there. Brandon, it's great. I appreciate your time. I hope we get you back, and maybe we'll get you and Jason and the team on all together. That would be awesome.
That would be fun. We could cover a lot of ground, have some fun.
We could. Sure. We could.
Yeah. But I definitely appreciate your time, Scott. This is fun. Glad you got this up and running here, and I appreciate you having me today.
That's great. Well, again, this is Scotty Milas, All Things Considered Franchising, powered by Scott Milas, Franchise Coach. We've been talking to Brandon Campbell of Image Studios. Until next time, friends, this is Scotty Milas signing out.